Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Anyway Whatever podcast. I'm your host, Mike Fisher, and today's guest is the one and only Joe Sib. Joe is a stand-up comic. He owns Side One Dummy Recordings. He has been in a bunch of cool bands, and he even had his own radio show here in Los Angeles for a while. So if anybody knows how to get behind a microphone and be entertaining, it's Joe. And we've been friends since we were kids, and it was really cool to sit down and chat with him for a while. And you know, we really talked for a long time, and I had to edit it down some, and some of that other content will end up coming out at a later time in other episodes. So yeah, I think everybody's really going to enjoy this one. Joe's a popular guy. He's a well-known guy around Los Angeles and the country from all the stuff he's done. And if you are watching on YouTube, please hit subscribe, give us a like, comment in the comment section, and let us know what you think. And as always, if you like what we're doing, you can always share this with people who you think will also like it. You can find us on all of the social medias with the Anyway Whatever podcast. And if you're listening to the podcast version of this show, you can subscribe on iTunes, give us a 5-star review there and anywhere where you get your podcast content. It all goes a long way to helping me keep doing this show. And I appreciate any and all support that everybody gives me. It's been really cool to be able to produce something that people seem to really like. So I won't hold you up anymore. I'll get you to the episode right on the other side of the jump.
My daughter, she's so smart. And I'll never forget what she says to me. She said, "Dad, I want to have a party." I was like, "Hell yeah, you came to the right guy." She's like, "Are you serious?" I go, "Yes." I go, "Honey, there's people in rehab still from the 90s from parties I threw." She's like, "Dad, I love you. I love you too, honey." She's like, "Dad, one thing." I go, "Anything you want." She's like, "Dad, can you not come to the party?" I'm like, "Hey, check it out. During the party tonight, make sure no one throws these speakers into the..." My daughter was like, "Dad, it's not that kind of party. I don't have friends like that, Dad." I was like, "You got lame friends, honey, and this is gonna be a lame party." I left. I wasn't mad, I was disappointed. There's a difference. Total difference.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm your host, Mike Fisher, and today's guest is longtime friend and person who's been making me laugh since I was a teenager, my buddy Joe Sib.
What up, buddy?
What's up, man? How you holding up through all this business?
I'm holding up. I think when it started, when I kind of had a feeling, and not that I'm like Nostradamus, but I knew when this started that it wasn't just like, hey, we're gonna jump in on March, 17th, and then it'll be cool by, April 17th. I was like, I remember I said to my family, because of course, they think Dad's a moron, and I said, you guys better chill because we're gonna be in this for a while. And I kind of went into that mindset that you go on when you go on a super long flight. Like if anyone's ever flown to Australia or Japan, it's just this monster flight. And what I like to do is they'll say, it's gonna be 12 hours to fly to Australia, and I'll be like, no, it's gonna be 16, just so that I can mentally prepare myself. So for me, when we started this, at-home orders, and they were like, oh, it's gonna be 30 days, and then just yesterday they declared, oh yeah, we're going till August for LA. That it's gonna still be, stay at home, and what a businesses that aren't essential, and they declared that till August. I've already said, oh yeah, man, that's going on until next year. So like mentally for me, I've just gotten into the headspace of this is our vibe now. And
Yeah.
you can be bummed. And I have my nights where I get bummed. Like last night I had a bad night because I was just like, you start just going through your head about, oh my God, how did we get here? And will we ever get out of it? But then like this morning I got up, we're able to surf. So I went surfing and I drank my coffee and I filled my day up with things to do, and then I go, okay, you know, I can get through the day. But yeah, it's definitely strange. It's like living a discharge song. I hate it.
Dude, do you have a clock going off in the background?
No, there's actually I can see from my house. I live across the street from a church.
Oh, okay. I was like, how does Joe have a grandfather clock? How does that make any sense?
No, so check it out. I live across the street from this church, this little teeny church, and it's crazy because starting at 7 a.m. until 8 o'clock at night, every hour the thing goes off, and it's like at first it's like when we moved into this apartment, we were like, oh dude, this is so quaint and it's so rad. You know, because we're temporarily living in San Diego right now, and it was like, oh, this is so cool. And then all of a sudden, like that sound, like ding dong, it's just all of a sudden, dude, it starts making you just question your life, and it's very it's crazy. But yeah, so every day I got that thing going on. I don't even hear it anymore.
You know what's gonna happen is me and you are we're gonna get so deep in the weeds. Chatting together that we're going to forget to do this. I wanted you to get your social media shout outs like right up front. So people would be able to go out and find you on social media while we're talking. So where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, best place for me is I don't hang out on Twitter. I have a Twitter account, so you know I consider Twitter like the bathroom. I use it and I get out of there.
You do totally.
Yeah,
it's the literal cesspool of the internet. I have one, but I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, I have like 2,000 followers and I never update it. And people are like, why don't you update it? And I go, because it's lame. Where I hang out all the time is Instagram, and it's Joe_Sib. And go there, Joe_Sib. And that's on Instagram. And also, you know, you can email me if you listen to this and you're like, that guy's full of shit. You can email me, Joe Sib, SIB. And then the number 22@gmail.com, joesib22@gmail.com. And if you go to my Instagram, you can also, there's a link to my website. There's a link to my YouTube channel, and you can check out my stand-up and everything I'm doing. But Instagram's the place for me.
Agreed. For people who don't know, Joe was in bands forever. And then he started the record label Side One Dummy Records, which has been extremely successful as an independent record label, which is not something that's easy to fucking do. And then he kind of found his way into, he was also, he had a radio show in the Los Angeles area for a while, and found his way into doing stand-up comedy kind of through, he did like a one-man show where he talked about his life growing up in the punk rock scene, and people liked it so much that he just ended up becoming a stand-up comic because it was so funny that and so I've been watching you for like the last like 8 years or so build your stand-up comedy career, and you've gotten really good at it, dude. Like
thanks, man.
I show the clips.
I
show the clips to my wife, and she's like, she's like, oh my God, that dude is so funny. You got to get him on your show.
I wish it was only 8 years. When you came to see me do California Calling, that's 12 years ago.
It couldn't have been because I came with Christy, and me and Christy have only been together for 10 years. So it couldn't have been.
Well, no, I've been doing stand-up. So then it was, you know what it is?
I saw California Calling with Christy. Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, because that was 10 years ago. Because
wow.
I did California Calling for like 2 years. And then like I did California Calling. And then I was like, you know what? I just want to do stand-up. I really want to try to do that. And my first night that I did like stand-up, where like I didn't have photographs and music and storytelling, and someone was like, hey, try to be funny in 10 minutes. That's 10 years ago this past January. So I celebrated my 10-year anniversary of stand-up, which the fact I've been doing stand-up for 10 years, and that's 10 years of doing stand-up every single week. Like I've never missed a week of doing stand-up until this quarantine.
Yeah. We talked earlier this week about you coming on and like trying to get all that together, and we chatted a little bit about like, is there ever going to be a time when people go back out to comedy clubs? Like it's one thing for it to be a music club, but comedy clubs are small, man. Like most comedy clubs are small, intimate places, and like they jam a lot of people into those little tiny places.
Yeah, I think what'll happen with stand-up is, well, the thing I think that's funny is there's all these, like I see a lot of comics, and they post these photos and they're like, it's them on stage, And I get it. Everyone is like, I miss stage. And you'll see a quote from someone like, oh God, can't wait to get back there. Can't wait to see everyone. Can't wait to be doing stand up. And for me, it might just be me. And this is why I love the mute on Instagram. Cause oh my God, dude, I've muted everyone but you. Like I've just like muted, I'm the master of the mute because I don't want to ever like hurt anyone's feelings by not following them. That's a friend. But like, I saw a lot of like, can't wait to be back on stage. I miss you. And it's just all about being on stage. And what I want to say is like, does the audience miss you? Like I haven't heard one person say to me, I like get on the phone with my buddy up north and he's like, okay, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pay my mortgage. We're deferring that right now. I have my own business. Unfortunately, it's not essential. So I don't know if my business is even gonna be around. My kids both go to private schools. We're already looking at, we got to pull them out of there. And during this conversation, I haven't heard him say, but what's really just on my mind is when can I go to a comedy show? I mean, what is happening? Like I need to be there. I haven't heard one person say that. So,
Totally, man.
Yeah. So as far as like us going back to the way it is, I don't want to use this as an analogy, but the best analogy I have is it's like when you used to sit around with your friends and be drinking and go, what do you think happens after we die? And then everyone has this like huge thing that they think happens. And right now, anyone that's talking about, we don't even know how long they're going to keep telling us to stay indoors. And now you have this big struggle between people. Like last night, the guy that runs Barstool, he put this thing out, and I'm not one of these guys that's like, let's get back to work, forget this disease, just move along. But I mean, he made a really good point. Okay, you got to tell us better what's going on. Like he just, like it was just so personal, and I was like, God, man, he has a point. Like, first you tell us we're going to flatten the curve. Now you're telling us we don't go back to work till we find a cure. Wait a minute, you never said that. And it's just, I don't know. It's confusing. That's the hardest thing. So whether or not we go back to comedy clubs, whether or not we go to music venues, I don't know how that is. I just know this though, that I feel like I'm just gonna wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, none of us have any choice really, but to do that. To speak a little bit to what you're saying, I totally agree that there are bigger issues in the world than whether or not we can go back to comedy clubs. But, that's how stand-up comedians make their living. And so it is a legitimate concern for them because they can't pay their damn rent either because they can't go out and work. One of the things that kind of speaks to that is a little bit of backstory is that I do a lot of the flyers for Joe's stand-up gigs. For
all of them.
Well, I've seen ones that I haven't done, so I know you moonlight with other people behind my back, which is totally fine.
Those other ones are like me, like asking my daughter, like, "Can you just make something for me?"
Dude, totally.
She'll be like, "All right." Yeah.
Because like I mean, to be honest, sometimes I'm super busy, and Joe doesn't have time to wait for me. And then sometimes Joe just tries to throw things at me with like, dude, I'm going on stage at like 8:30 tonight. And he's like sending me this at like 5 p.m. And he's like, can you get me this thing? And I'm like, fuck, dude.
Yeah.
But, so me and Joe are in contact a lot, and we get on the phone quite a bit, and we'll have these like conversations, and Joe always makes me laugh because he's a funny fucking dude. But, when the quarantine started happening, Joe started hitting me up for to do flyers for his Instagram account where he started doing sets in his wife's closet. Yeah. I thought that was hilarious. I was leave it to Joe to like just figure out a way to keep doing it,
Yeah. I mean, I did shows out of my wife's closet. We called it Live from a Tiny Closet I did it for like 5 weeks. No, I did it for 4 weeks because I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it for 4 weeks. I'm going to hit up people. I wanted to make it more personable. So I did it Zoom. I didn't want to do it on Facebook or something like that. I wanted it to be something that like you had to like get a code to do. So then that way you would show up. And I mean, it was crazy because, I had every night I did it, I had between like 200 and 300 people, which was great. And the only thing was that like I decided, I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do jokes. And then I kind of just picked a theme for like each show. Like, one of the shows was, stories about the Ramones. Like I just did a whole night dedicated to the Ramones.
Oh, you're going to have to give me one of those at some point later on too. So don't worry about that.
And then I did another show. I did another show dedicated to like just 10 years in stand-up comedy and just like the comics I've opened for, the people I've toured with, the good nights, the bad nights. Talked about joke writing. People like that one too. And then the last one I did was just kind of like just an eclectic, like one of like a few different themes and then answering questions. And it was cool to do. Like I thought it was fun doing that. And it kind of made me think about doing different things because I feel like a lot of comics I know right now don't want to exercise that muscle. And I get it. Like I have some really good friends that are going through like a dark time because they're like, I haven't been creating at all. I'm super depressed and I don't want to talk to my phone. I don't want, like, Joe, it's cool. You're in your closet. I don't want to do that. I think it's lame.
Right.
And I go, I get it. And I'm not saying being in my closet is rad. I'm just saying, I know for me personally that if I don't work that muscle and get that weird feeling of like, oh God, I'm going to be live on Zoom. I had to learn how to work it. And I got to do something for the people for an hour. That muscle doesn't work. Then it's going to, when you do have to do it, it'll be like you put on weight. I won't be where I want to be. Granted, I know a lot of other comics that just don't want to do that at all. And like I was talking to a guy before I talked to you and he's just like, dude, I'm not creating anything. And then, people say, well, can't you write? Can't you write while this time's going on? And comics are like, no, there's nothing funny right now.
Right. I had a friend who's a writer, not a comedy writer, but a novelist, and I really wanted her to come on, and she's an insanely awesome person. And I got a hold of her, and I was like, hey, let's schedule something. And she's like, look, man, I don't feel like running around showing my face as a creative person when all this shit is going on, and like I don't want, and so I kind of get that, where it's like, who wants to try to be funny when people can't pay their rent or feed their kids by no fault of their own, so I get that. I totally get that. And
backing up to when I said that thing about, just someone saying, oh, I miss being on stage and I can't wait to see you. And I miss touring and I miss this. Like that to me isn't so much about, hey, I've got to be on stage to pay the rent. It was more about, hey, I got to be on stage. Look at me. And that's the only thing, like when you say what she's saying, that it's that to me is the real thing. Like,
right.
Like, the other day I had to unfollow. I've unfollowed like a few people because and this is not even comics, just people in general, where like they make these jokes about if I see one more meme about the coronavirus, if I see one more hacky bit about the coronavirus, I'm just like, like if I go to
well, you better stay off of my Facebook page because I've been coronavirus memes nonstop. But just as my way to like help people kind of get out of the doom space, like if you can't laugh a little bit about the hard times in life, what is comedy if it isn't to help you laugh a little bit about the hard times in life? So
I totally agree with you, and I guess what I mean is more like I guess sometimes, if you hear someone say something mean and they're
there's
like,
no reason to be
you're
mean.
like, come on, dude, like that's not cool. But I will say that like one of the best Corona jokes that I saw that like was so great was when the dude, they go, you due to home order, you have a choice. You can stay at home with your wife and kids, A, or B. And he goes, B. Like the guy, do you remember that one? With the guy, he gets two choices.
Totally.
A, you can stay at home with your wife and kids. B, he's all B. Like he just takes it. Like that was so good. And then there was another one that said like, hey, if you get coronavirus, you're quarantined away from your family for 2 weeks. And the person's like, dude, sounds like a rad idea. Like, I thought that was funny.
Totally. I know that you have your daughter's a little above teenage, but you have your teenage son. So it's like you, your wife, and your teenagers kind of in the house. So that's got to be a new experience.
Dude, not really. It's just been like, I gotta say, like my daughter, my son, and my wife, like everyone, I don't know, there hasn't been I mean, sure, we've had our moments, but nothing like I thought we would have. My daughter's boyfriend, though, stayed with us, and he's a super cool kid, and we really like him as a family. So he's kind of the witness. Like, we can't wail on each other. We can't really be who we really are because he's here and we want him to like us. So like, I can't, like, I think he's like the witness that keeps everyone in check. And that's really made a difference.
It's like when your mom acted right when you were growing up because the company was over and you could say some shit that you would normally get smacked in the head for.
Yeah, the only difference was when the company left, you knew the beatdown was just getting there.
Right. You were hoping she had enough time that she let that shit slide, but it never happened that way.
What you're hoping is those like 4 rosés maybe lightened her up a little bit to forget that you were rude or that you said something out of line. And then, of course, you know, as soon as the person's red car lights drove down the street, you're like, uh-oh, here we go, the moment of truth.
I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've been talking about it a little bit with guests when they come on is like, you know, one of the benefits of this for me is that I get to see my wife all day, every day. Unless I'm out here recording episodes, but, you know, because she works in the film industry. And so, you know, when she's on set on a TV show or a movie, you know, I might not see her, but for like 15 minutes a day, you know, for 6 months. So this has been super cool. And she's jumped on and started helping me kind of produce this whole project because I decided to, you know, stop and take some time and actually try to make something as pro as I could. And so I couldn't have handled all the moving parts of doing this without her having her here to, like, you know, schedule people and, you know, manage the paperwork and figure out, like, I'll be like, okay, I need to know how to do this thing in Adobe Premiere with editing. So I need you to watch a YouTube video while I'm recording somebody and then, you know, save that so that I can come back and watch it real quick. And she'll like track down stuff. She's gathering images. Cause like, you know, when I do the final episodes, you know, people will have already seen by now that, I'll be putting up like what if I'm talking about something specific, like I'll throw an image up. So she's collecting images for me and stuff. And she's been super helpful. It's been awesome.
Dude, the thing that no one ever thinks about when they start doing a podcast, cause like I did the parenting podcast for like 3 years and I was the co-host. I was the producer. I was the advertiser. I did everything for that podcast, editor, you know, everything. And I remember when it ended, I was so relieved because my day, you know, every week, you know, we had, you know, if we had X amount of episodes in the can, it was cool. But like, you know, there was these times where like I'd be on tour or my co-host would be on tour and we would get back together and, you know, she's an author. So she was always teaching and people loved her. Her name was AWP and she wrote this book, like 9 Ways We're Screwing Up Our Daughters and How We Can Stop. And she was really ahead, like, you know, not ahead, but she was, you know, pre the Me Too movement. She was already calling out, like, you know, she was a feminist. She was already calling out so many just topics that everyone went to discuss. Like we were talking about them like 2 years early and she was just great. But the thing was, like you said, there's so much, like when I started the podcast, I'm like, yeah, dude, it's just recording a conversation. No.
Right. And especially because I'm doing a podcast version and a video portion. So it's like,
you got it.
Yeah. Nowadays you kind of have to. Did you guys do a lot of writing for it or did you just kind of like, you know, free flow it?
I would love to tell you that what I wanted to do, to be honest with you, I wanted to do a lot of writing. I wanted it, like, I'm a very, like, when it comes to stuff like that, I'm anal. Like, I want things organized. I want topics. Like, I really wanted my co-host, like, I would say to her, like, hey, like, let's get 10 episodes in the can, and then we don't have to stress. And, you know, we would sit down together and we would kind of broad stroke an idea. And then before I knew it, we'd kind of have to just go, you know what, we just got to start recording or we're going to have a show. And one of the things that I love working with Anea was she always delivered. Like that was one thing that anytime I hit play record, she just slid into that therapist mode. And I think that was really the success of the show because, you know, the title of the, you know, it was Rad Parenting. You know, she's an expert, he's not. So my whole thing was, you know, I just was who I was, asking questions, and Anea had these amazing answers. And what ended up happening was people were listening to the show and getting an hour's worth of therapy for free every week. And it really took on a life of its own. Like, I remember, when we put up our first episode, and I remember, like, I'd done other podcasts, and it would be like at the end of the week, like 43 downloads, and you're just like, really? And like, I think 2 of those are mine. Damn it. Like, you're just so bummed. And then I remember the first one we put up, like, it cracked 1,000, and I was like, what? And then it just kept growing and growing and growing, and it was really fun. I learned a lot. I always say I would have been a way better parent to my kids if I would have done that podcast before I had kids.
Right. Yeah.
The podcast, was just about me fucking up and asking Anea how to fix it.
Dude, totally. I'm trying to do the same thing too, where I'm just trying to get as many in the can before I launch them, so that I'm not running around stressed out every week. Like, I got to figure it out. Like, I want to have enough that I can, like, take a week off to do, because I'm still a working graphic designer. You know what I mean? Like, I still have work to do. And so, I have to be able to take a week off to finish a project and not be stressed out that I didn't record any content for that week. So, dude, I totally get that. So a little bit of backstory on me and Joe, going back all the way further. Me and Joe have known each other since we were like 15 years old. And I'm not sure that Joe knows these 2 things that I'm about to go over about our relationship over the years. Is number 1, Joe's first band was called Rage. And they were just like, it was like it was like every other first hardcore punk band. And
I played bass.
And I had an association with one of the other guys in the band, and I swear to God, I don't remember his name or what he did in the band. But I think there was 2 brothers. Was there 2 brothers in the band?
There was the guy. There was a guy named John Lawson.
And then there was John. It was John Lawson.
I'm pretty sure it's John Lawson, because he was like a notorious, like, he was a dude that like knew everybody. He played guitar.
Yep, it was John Lawson.
One time, John. Yeah, I got a funny story about John Lawson after you tell yours.
So I ran into John Lawson one day, and I'm just shooting this shit at a bus stop somewhere in Los Gatos, California, and because that's where a lot of us hung out back in the days, at a bus stop somewhere. Shout out Bus Stop Punks. That was my crew. And John mentioned that he had a silk screening kit that he'd gotten from like Aaron Brothers Art Mart or something, but he couldn't really figure out how to use it. And I was like, oh, I can totally figure out how to use it. And so he's like, okay, I'll give you that screen printing kit if you make a screen and do some shirts for my band Rage. And I was like, dude, it's a done deal. So hooked it up. He gave me the kit, and I made these. And I didn't even know who Joe was at that point. Look, there's Nate.
You live? Hey, what's up? You live? Yeah. Come on over. No, well, I'm doing a podcast with Mike. You can't. You're gonna throw on a shirt? What are we doing? Yeah. He's looking for a shirt.
Joe's son just came cruising through the room. Which
is all his gear.
Totally
dude.
fine.
This is all his gear.
Dude, Joe's son is an amazing singer.
Oh my God, dude! He writes all these beats. He sells beats, dude.
That's
awesome.
A
beat lab I'm sitting in.
So
he gives you the screen printing kit. And that's something. It's so great. John Lawson at 15, knowing that, like, how smart is that? That he wasn't like, no, dude, it's mine and you can use it. He's saying, I don't want to have anything to do with screen printing because anyone that's ever done it knows it sucks.
Right.
And he's just like, you can have it. Just give me shirts.
Right. And that was, and there was like some art that he gave me that was like a tombstone with like a hand coming out of the grave thing. And so that was
Ron Lips designed that.
Who did?
Yeah. This guy named Ron Lips from San Jose. He was in like he's an artist from San Jose. And I'm pretty sure his name's Ronald Lips. And he's actually on my Instagram. And we still stay in contact. But he was in, I forgot which class we had together. He was an artist like you. He was always drawing stuff. And I remember I go, dude, I'm in this band Rage. Can you draw us a logo? And he drew us the tombstone with the hands coming out. And I was like, it was like everything you wanted. So
dude, it was so like 1983 punk. It was amazing.
Sure.
So that taught me how to screen print. And that is kind of how I started getting into making art for bands, actually, was that a lot of times, like when like Aggression or 7 Seconds would come through town, I would make a bunch of bootleg shirts and I would sell them out front of the show so that I could get money to get in, because I didn't have any money. And then I would like find the band. I'd always go around back of the venue, find the vans where all the bands were, and I'd just give them half of whatever the money that I'd made. Or if I had shirts left, I'd be like, hey, do you want the rest of these shirts to sell? Whatever. I was always good about like making sure, but it was a way for me to be able to get into shows. So I taught myself how to do to do screen printing that way. And then the next thing was that there was a period in time where me and Joe ran in different circles, and I had a friend who didn't like Joe. So, I was on my friend's team, and me and Joe didn't really, our worlds didn't mesh too much. And then our mutual friend named Matt Arlick, rest in peace to Matt Arlick. He passed away a few years, like 10 years ago. He was probably the raddest.
Thanksgiving Day.
For sure the raddest dude I've ever known, maybe.
Yeah.
Died
on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that was a bummer. That was not a good Thanksgiving for me. And it makes it makes me think about him every single Thanksgiving. I think about Matt.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and I always say to him, he did that on purpose.
Dude, totally. So Matt actually lived with Joe, and they had a half pipe in their backyard, and I started coming over and skating, and me and Joe actually became really good friends. And so Joe at the time was in a band called Lifeline that had previously been known as Frontline. And he was the second artist to ever actually hire me specifically for a shirt design and give me money for that. Adam Siegel from The Faction, who is another guest on, he was the first person. And so that's the distinction of Joe in my art career, is like you were in there early on. And we've managed to keep doing stuff together like for like 35 years. I did a bunch of stuff for Side One Dummy Records when I was just moved to LA and was just trying to figure out how to do album covers. I did the first 7-inch for Joe's band, 22 Jacks, actually.
Yeah, and you did the How to Start a Fight compilation. That was the first. The How to Start a Fight compilation was at this time. We start Side One Dummy Records, and at this time, everyone is putting out these compilation albums, and it was like you get different bands from different labels. Everyone's on the compilation. That's how you dip your toe into like, hey, we're going to be a label. And Bill and I came up with this idea of it was like How to Start a Fight. Yeah, let's name the compilation that. And then like I think it all spawned from us just in our office, because my partner Bill and I would just, when we started the company, we didn't have like computers or anything. It was like two guys that were stoked on music. So we used to mess around a lot and joke around and make crank phone calls and joke. And then Bill came up with this idea for How to Start a Fight. And then we came up that there was going to be a booklet. And then we were like, oh yeah, wouldn't it be rad to like have all these things of what you can do to start a fight, And then that was when I called you, and then we're like, Mike, can you animate it? And you were like, okay. And then, dude, the booklet, like, I don't even know if you could get away with making a booklet like that. It was so bad. There was one in there I know that said like, how to start a fight, like yell at old people.
I think it was
scam on your best friend's mom.
Like, yeah, the scam on your best friend's mom was good. There was like a main character that was like basically a cartoon version of me. And it was like, and I was doing all of these different things that you would do to start a fight with somebody. And then every page had like a band on it with like their song. And then there was like an image of a different way to start a fight. And it was like scam on your friend's mom. And it was like me just like going to town on some old lady.
Yeah. And like the dude walking in, he's all, Mom, and the guy, and you're going, what's up? I remember we used to laugh so hard. And then like it had it was like yell at old people, scam on your best friend's mom. What was another one? Like make fun of people's families. Like
dude, it was so many, dude.
Dude, it was so bad and so wrong. And that was the first thing we ever put out. And I remember you animated it. I remember Bill and I, to this day, like every once in a while, someone would bring one of those CDs around. And they'd be like a new person that worked at Side One, and they would just be like, who made this? And like, whose idea was this? And we'd be like, me and him. And it offended so many people, dude. They were so bummed because your drawings were so great. They were just like this character, this one dude that was just blowing it at all times, and it was so funny. I loved it.
That was
like our first real release.
That's amazing. I wasn't really aware of that. I thought you'd had some other stuff out really kind of before that.
No, we ain't got anything out that like, because like the compilation was the thing that like opened the door, and then obviously, we started signing bands, but before then, we couldn't sign anybody. So the compilation was really everything for us.
Yeah, and then I think the thing that really, really put some money in the bank for you guys was the Warped Tour compilations. You started doing the Warped Tour compilation, and I think that was it, right? I mean,
Flogging Molly. I mean, it all changed for us. Like the big thing for us was getting the chance to do the Warp comp. That opened the door to so many things. And then when we signed Flogging Molly, it was just game on, and it just never stopped.
Yeah, I work with a lot of other independent record labels, and not a single one of them has been able to be as successful as you guys for so many years. I mean, it's been like 25 years. Yeah. When I first moved, when I first moved down to LA, I was working kind of a sliding schedule because my kid's mom would work mornings, and then I would kind of go into my video game job later. So I had my two youngest kids who weren't yet in school. My daughter was like 1 or 2, and my son Jordan was like 5 or something. And so in the morning times, I'd like get them all dressed, and we'd jam over to Side One Dummy Records, and like immediately like Joe would be like, Uncle Joe's taking you downstairs right now and buying you candy. And it would be like 9 or 10 in the morning. And I'm like, what are you doing, dude?
Totally.
And he'd be like, nope, fuck you, dude. And he'd like grab my kids and like run them down the stairs to this little cafe that was downstairs and like buy them candy. He's like, the only impression I want those kids to have all of their life is like, Joe Sib's the fun uncle. And so like we'd go over there like a couple of times a week and like hang out with the Side One dudes, and it was instrumental in me learning how to do print graphics, because I taught myself everything I know, and I fucked up a lot of stuff for you guys where you were like, no dude, you can't fuck it up like that. And I was like,
I remember the thing I remember the most though, Mike, like because Bill and I would trip. Because you would come in with 3 kids, and you were like 20. And we were just like,
I was 25.
Yeah, we're like, dude, he has 3 kids, and we would just trip on it. And then, obviously, down the road we started having kids. But I loved that first office on Melrose, man. I remember my daughter used to come there like when she was super young, because I lived walking distance from that office. I didn't have a car.
Oh yeah, I remember.
For like 10 years. I didn't have a car for 10 years. We had one car. Karen and I split a car. And I would walk every morning to work on Melrose. I loved it, man. It was such a great setup. And, we didn't move over to Cahuenga for like 10 years.
Yeah. And how long were you guys at that Cahuenga office? Because that was like Hollywood.
Oh, yeah. We were there. We were there for another like 12 years, something like that. So like all in all, we were in Hollywood for like 22 years. And then we ended up selling the property in Hollywood and then
did you own that building?
Yeah, we own the building.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cha-ching. Yeah, no shit, dude.
I wish I could take credit for that. I can't. Yeah, it was all Bill Armstrong.
Bill Armstrong, super genius. Yeah, super funny.
Yeah,
dude.
He was the one. Yeah, he was the one that I had never bought anything like that, and he was just like, he was like, dude, why would we rent for something we don't own, and we need this space? But then what ended up happening was we were there for 12 years, and it was great. It was such a great space. But then, once the CD disappeared, it was like we had this huge warehouse, and then we had this, basically everything just kept getting smaller and smaller. And then we were like, you know what? We don't need this much space. So then we ended up selling that building, and then we ended up getting a spot over in Glendale that we still have.
And it's just
now
like
we have an office in Nashville.
What's that?
Now we have our space in Hollywood, but we also have a space that we're gonna open up. Gosh, probably beginning of next year. I mean, if everything goes the way it's supposed to, in Nashville. So we'll have an office in Nashville and then have an office in Hollywood.
Wow. Yeah, because the Glendale space, isn't it kind of like half retail, half office? Like I've never been in there, so I'm not sure how it works.
What it is? It's in a retail space. But like if we chose to like be a record store, we could.
Oh, because I thought that you kind of did. That's what you were doing in the beginning. Is like you could come in and buy records. Yeah.
Yeah, we did this thing when we first opened it up. One of the people that worked there came up with a really cool idea, and they basically put together like they would do like a once a month shop where like you
pop
could
up?
like come in and pop up. And we literally, took that idea from Fat Records because they were doing it.
Right.
So we were like, oh, why don't we do it? And it was cool because it was a trip because, people would come from all over Los Angeles to buy like the vinyl and everything we had there, which was kind of neat to meet the people that would show up.
Sure, for sure. You guys are you in the Sealy building? Is that where that space is? Yeah. I remember when that was still just an empty building. And then when it opened up, I thought to myself, because at the time I was getting my my ice hockey goalie mask business going, and I was looking for space, and I was like, I wonder how much it would cost me to get space in there. And very quickly I was like, oh no, you can't afford to be in that building. So I ended up in this half of a 2-car garage in East Hollywood that was like an MS-13 controlled gang neighborhood, and it was a little bit dicey for like 3 or 4 years. And now I'm back out here in the valley where it's nice and quiet. But yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about because anybody who knows Joe, one of the funny things is that I've been interviewing people for this show, and people that I didn't even know you, or like, like it'll come up, like I'm like, yeah, I like Joe Sib, my friend Joe Sib's gonna be on, and blah blah blah, and they'll be like, oh yeah, say hi to him, and I'm like, how do you know Joe? And like my friend Alan Heights worked on Jonesy's Jukebox when you were doing your radio show. And he was like, yeah, he's like, I don't know if you remember me, but say hi to Joe Sib for me. And so my friend Alan Heights
that was
says
in
hi.
1031. Yeah.
But one of the things, anybody who knows Joe knows that his favorite band is the Ramones. And to the point where Joe's one of those people, and they're the kind of people that keep ending up on the show who it's that DIY spirit, and it's just that spirit of, I want to do something so bad, I'm just going to just do it and make it what my reality is. And Joe has been that way for every minute that I've known him. And it's one of the things that I love about Joe so much. And it's one of the things that has become such a great theme about this show. It's the theme about this show that it emerged on its own, is it's people who will not be contained. And so they're just going to do the things in life that they want to do. And every single thing that Joe has done over the course of his life has been that exact same way. So when it comes to the Ramones, Joe loved the Ramones so much that he just decided he was going to become a friend of theirs, and like just kind of inserted himself into the Ramones family. And I remember there was like, I don't know how it is that you actually met them at first, but I remember there was like a night where you almost got to be the pinhead or something on the stage with the Ramones or something. How did you meet them?
I met them in San Jose, One Step Beyond. They came through.
I was at that show.
And the first time they ever came through, they did One Step Beyond. They did it. I remember they did. I want to say,
for those people who don't know, that it is a small club to have a band like the Ramones in.
Yeah, which is funny because when I was a kid going there, I thought it was huge. It looked like this huge thing. So
we were little.
I think One Step Beyond was like 1,000 seats, something like that, or not seats, but 1,000 people would fit in there, or less. And hey, what's up? I have the charger. I need the charger. Wait, let me see. I don't know.
Nate's
I have
back.
to join class. Let me see. Hold on. Let me see. Nate, play a beat, dude. It's at 38%. All right, here we go. I gotta give Nate the charger.
That's
right,
totally fine, dude. Totally fine.
Here we go. All right, and Nate, if I start to bail, you gotta give it back. Cool. So yeah, so like what ended up happening? Can you shut the door, Nate? Thanks. So what ended up happening was when One Step Beyond had these shows, I was like so into the band, and I remember like during the show, during the show, I actually climbed up onto the soundboard. It was in the back of the venue, and my band had played there a lot, so I knew the way this venue worked. And I remember I climbed up onto the soundboard, and as I was climbing up, and the only reason I was climbing up was because I really wanted to get like a good shot of the band. Like I just wanted to really take in their presence. And while I was watching them, the lighting man for the Ramones, Arturo Vega, and at this point, I don't know him, he was motioning like, you're in my way, move over. And I went to get down, and he was like, no, you can still be up here, but just come over here. and stand here. Just don't, you can't stand where you are. So then I remember I climbed over and I looked over the little area that, they were in. And now, I have the Ramones sound man to the left of me. I'm in the middle, and then Arturo's to the right of me. And I just kind of stepped back. And, at this point, I'd been around music enough to know like how to act. And I was watching the band. I was just so stoked to be up there. And I remember they finished up, and before they finished up, Arturo said to me, "Hey, can you go over to the bar and grab me 2 Heinekens?" And at this point, I was probably 19, but I knew the bartender, so I jumped over there, and I came back with the 2 Heinekens. And then, he was working and drinking his beer, and then the show ended, and I was just like, "Oh man, thank you so much." And I went to bail, and he said, "Hey, what's your name?" But he had this really thick Mexican accent. He was from Chihuahua, and he was like, "What?" He's like, "Hey, what is your name?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm Joe Sib." He's like, "All right, Joe Sib." And I'm like, "Wow, I love the Ramones." And he's like, "Would you like to meet the Ramones?" And I go, "No." And he goes, "Why?" And I go, "Because if they're dicks, it's gonna blow it for me." And I remember he just looked at me and he goes, "The Ramones are not dicks." And the next thing I know, he's like, "Come with me." And I remember we jumped down, and everyone's leaving the venue, and we went through, and we went in the dressing room, and it was just like within, it was like all of a sudden, boom, there they are. And I remember Johnny was sitting on a chair, Johnny Ramone was sitting on a chair, Joey was leaned up against the wall, Dee Dee was kind of milling about, talking, and Marky was just kind of sitting there with his sunglasses on, and he was the first one to leave. And then Arturo said, "Hey, you guys, this is Joe Sib. He's from San Jose. He's a big fan. Can you guys sign?" And I had the set list, and I still have it. And he went around, and everyone signed it. And then I remember I was sitting there with Johnny, and then now Arturo just kind of bailed, and it's just I'm back there now with the band and their crew, and it's just like that moment where you're like, "All right, are you going to be a Punisher or not?" And I remember
for people who aren't familiar with that term Punisher, a Punisher, any of us who've ever been in bands are very familiar with that term. And a Punisher is somebody who, when they meet a band, they just start jamming them up with questions after question after question about, "And I was at this show and I saw that, and do you remember that?" And it's like the person who just way oversteps the personal space and time boundary.
Yeah, you're punishing them with your enthusiasm of how much you love them.
Right.
And it's just like, "Oh my God, this guy's a Punisher." So I'm sitting there, and I remember Johnny was sitting in his chair, and I sat down, and he was talking about baseball. And at that point, I lived with my dad. My dad always had baseball on. Like, I just grew up with sports on all the time, and not that I knew it, but I was, I guess, paying attention and retaining a lot of the information.
It was just getting in there. It was the baseball brainworm that from living around.
Yeah, which was crazy because Johnny started talking about he was trying to get a score for a game, probably the Yankees, and I knew that the Yankees had won or lost that night, and he's like, "Oh, okay," and then he's like, "Oh, hey, are you an A's fan or a Giants fan?" And I'm like, "Oh, dude, I'm a Giants fan." He's like, "Really?" I go, "Yeah, dude, my dad, because the Giants were originally from the East Coast, and he knew that." And then he said, "Oh, where's your dad from?" And my dad was from he was from Queens, but it was near Forest Hills where the Ramones were from. So right away we started talking. And the thing that I didn't know it at the time, but whenever you meet someone super, super famous, if you really do have a conversation with them, like the trick is this, like if you know them, like I did this with Eddie Vedder, like I had the opportunity where that's a different story, but like I had to meet Eddie Vedder because
you told me this story once. It's so good.
But like there was this moment in time where like I had to sit down with Eddie Vedder, and it was after a show, and no one would talk to him, and he was super just off-putting. Like you could tell like he didn't want to talk to anyone. We were at this party, and I couldn't leave the party until I talked to him because I had to get an answer from him about something. And I was with Bill, and long story short, I'm like, if I go over there and I go, "Oh, dude, I love Pearl Jam," it says be like, "You're done." But when I went over there, I sat down. I go, "Hey, man," I go, "Dude, we got a mutual friend," and he was like, "We do?" And I go, Johnny Ramone. He's like, you know Johnny? And then we started talking about the Ramones. And then that like loosened him up. That, like,
You had to name drop to get in there with Eddie Vedder.
Yeah. And then he kind of motioned for me to like sit down, and then we sat down. But then I ended up hanging out with him like for hours because he had just came back, and there had been this story where there was this little picture, and Kelly Slater had talked about going on this surf trip, and he brought Eddie Vedder out there, and there was this picture of Eddie Vedder, just this little picture that like in Surfer magazine probably no one cared, but I said to him, I'm like, I go, dude, you know what? I got to ask you one question. I got to ask you right now. And I remember the look on his face was like, oh,
Here
God,
comes
here
the
we
Punisher.
go. It's going to be some broken thing. And the first thing I said to him was, I go, dude, what was it like being on a surf trip with like Kelly and those guys? I mean, are you dropping in on, and he just, right away, he's like, it was gnarly. Like they're pushing me to take off on bigger waves. And because it's them, I don't want to let them down. And then, dude, we talked that night for like 2 hours about surfing, punk rock, Generation X, the Ramones. And then at the end of the night, I got my answer because we were supposed to go to Mexico City to see them play, and it all got set up. But my point being is the same thing happened with Johnny, is that I got into that camp because I didn't talk to Johnny about how much I loved, Road to Ruin, and how much I thought Pleasant Dreams was like the greatest record, and how much I loved the Mosrite guitar he played, or any of that stuff. What I talked to him about was baseball, and because we went back and forth about the Giants, and we talked a lot about baseball, that I remember anytime the Ramones after that point started coming to the Bay Area, I always would go, and I always got in through Arturo Vega, and he would always put me on the list. And Johnny would always see me, and he'd always be like, hey, it's what's going on, man? Joe Sib, the Giants, what do you think? And we'd talk about that. And then as I remember one time I said to him, when I met him initially, I was like, he's like, so what do you do? Are you in a band? And I go, yeah, man. We actually play here, One Step Beyond, my band Frontline, and all I want to do is do what you do. And he looks at me and he goes, why? And I'm like, because that's what I want to do. And I remember Dee Dee Moan leaned in and he goes, John, the kid still likes music. That's why he wants to do what you do. And Johnny said to me straight up, I remember I was going to college, and he's like, I'm like, dude, I was going to junior college. I'm like, I don't even want to go to college. I just want to go on tour. And he's like, hey, man, whatever you do, finish college, dude. Because I'm telling you right now, like, if I wasn't in the Ramones, I'd be doing construction. He goes, that was my last job. And he goes, I have no other trait except construction or playing guitar in the Ramones. And I was like, it stuck with me. So then what ended up happening is that when I went to De Anza College, and then I
went to De Anza too.
Yeah. So
Shout out De Anza College.
Shout out, yeah, junior college. And then I got into Santa Clara University. And the thing that would happen was whenever the Ramones would come through the Bay Area, I was there. And Johnny would always say to me, hey, Joe Sib, so how's college going? And I'd be like, yeah, dude, it's good. I'm almost done. And then at one point, the Ramones were playing. It was like I was like a junior at Santa Clara University. And I get a phone call from Arturo. And he goes, hey, man, we're coming through California, and we're doing the Roxy in Hollywood. And I go, really? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, Johnny said, I can ask if your band wants to come down and play. And I was like, fuck yeah. Yeah. We go all the way down there, and that's a whole other story. It was fucking amazing. And we opened up for the Ramones. And I was so crazy because it was just us and the Ramones at the Roxy. They hadn't played there since they did Rock and Roll High School. And I remember the crowd was chanting, "Hey ho, let's go!" Like before we went on stage. And then I remember we go on stage and we're supposed to play 40 minutes, and we played 3 songs. And I go, after the 3rd song, I was like, who's here? I mean, I was like, I said something like, the Ramones are here tonight, something like that. And the crowd went nuts. I'm all right, we're out of here. And I remember I got off stage, and Gary Tovar was like, what the fuck? You still got another 30 minutes. I'm like, you go out there, dude. I'm done. And I remember Steve Soto was there from the Adolescents, and we just like, it was so crazy. We were all, Corey O'Brien came down from LA. Like everyone just jammed into the show, and they just destroyed. But years later, I'd been around that camp, the Ramones camp, for so long, and when I was in Wax, we opened up for the Ramones. When I was in, obviously 22 Jacks, Joey was a huge fan, and like I became really good friends with Joey, and when I say huge fan, I mean like I was a fan of him. He liked 22 Jacks a lot, so that was super cool. But like I had this great relationship with Joey and Johnny, and it was really different. Like Johnny was really business, and then Joey was more like music, and he was just such a sweetheart. But years later, there was this photo shoot, and they were going to take a picture of Joe Strummer, and they were taking a picture of Johnny Ramone, and this like in the 2000s. And Arturo came out, and at this point, Arturo was like at my wedding. Arturo like threw my engagement party. Like he's just been a part of my life. And Arturo brought the Mosrite guitar out for Johnny to take this photo with Joe Strummer. And I'd met Joe Strummer years before when I moved to LA, and that's another story.
Joe Strummer of The Clash, for people who may not be
Joe
familiar.
Strummer Clash. So we're sitting there, and there's this crazy moment where, I mean, you're sitting first of all, you're in the whiskey, and you're just like, okay, seen a million shows here, and then they're doing this photo shoot with Joe Strummer of The Clash and Johnny Ramone of the Ramones. And I think at that point, they hadn't seen each other in years, and I was there with Arturo, so it was just Arturo, me, the photographer, probably his assistant, and then these two iconic people that you're just like, it's like if you're a Catholic, it's like, dude, I'm hanging out, Jesus rolls in, and then his dad shows up, and it's like, dude, what? It's like it was just insanity, And I'm like, wow, this is nuts. And I'm just sitting there, and Johnny, Joe Strummer goes, hey, he's very like, hey, Joe Sib, how are you? I'm like, hey, Joe, it's so good to see you. And then Johnny says, hey, Joe, to Joe Strummer, you know what I'm responsible for? And Strummer's like, what? And he goes, I told Joe Sib to go to college, and he did. And then I remember Strummer takes a drag off his smoke, and he's all, Joe Sib, the college boy. It's just like so perfect. Like Johnny was so stoked that he really took credit in like, I told him to go to college, and he did. And then Strummer was so like, just kind of like making fun of it. But yeah, man, I mean the Ramones, that whole thing, that whole time that I got to hang out with them. And, I remember Arturo Vegas said once to me, he's like, you're such a fan of like punk rock and that whole, and just everything, that it's almost strange. He was like, it borderlines on weirdness. And it's just, I don't know, like you said, when I get into something, I really get into it.
It's funny. It's like a total quick, like little plug for your Instagram. Joe, has taken some of his stand-up comedy clips, and he had pieces of animation done to animate the action that he's doing the joke about. And there's this like hilarious one of those about him like going to a show as a kid and like slam dancing for like 8 straight hours. And
8 hours.
It's so funny because that's a really good illustration of who Joe is, because when we were kids, he was that guy for sure. And then it's like you just never stopped being that dude. It's like amazing to me. I absolutely love that.
Remember though, because you remember, for like the people like watching and listening right now, like it's hard to believe this, but like when Mike and I were going to shows, there was this thing where like the show started at like 8 o'clock, and literally it would go like 8, it'd be like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2. So like 7 hours, it'd be like there'd be like, of course, like, something like 10 bands. And you would slam dance for 8 hours. Like it would like just nonstop. And it's hard to believe that, because now, you go to a show and there's like 3 bands max. Back when we were kids, it was like, if there wasn't like 6 bands on the show, it was lame.
Yeah, me and Bones talked about that a little bit, about how it was like, it would be like, you'd go to a show at the Farm in San Francisco, and you would get there at noon, and you'd still be watching bands at midnight. And you'd just be stage diving for like 12 hours. Like if I did one stage dive right now, I'd be in bed for a week and a half. But I was also that kid who was like you, I was so into it. I was going to be there to see the first band. I wasn't one of these people who rolled in, midway through so you could see the last 4 bands. I always wanted to be the first one there and the last one out the doors, because I was so into it. And like you you were obviously way more savvy about it than I was. But I just wanted to be a part of everything. You know, I wanted to be a part of the entire thing. And I suffered a little bit from being an introvert. So like, and I was always smaller than everybody. So, you know, I was at the same parties as everybody else in the San Jose scene. Like I was at all those parties, but I was just like a little kid, and I would just like kind of lay low. And so a lot of people that, you know, I'll be talking to someone who's like, you know, a couple years older or whatever, and they'll be like, yeah, we were at this party, and like, you know, Chris Medder's like punched Stanger like right in the nose or something. And I'll be like, yeah, dude, I totally remember that. And they're like, you weren't there. And I'll be like, yeah, I was there. I was at all those parties, you know, shout out Stanger. Me and Stanger are friends on Facebook.
Chris Medders. What's the last name again?
Eric Stanger.
Wait, what's Chris's last?
Medders.
No, I love Eric Stanger. Yeah, I totally remember Chris. Chris gave me a ride home after I got in a car accident on the way to Social Distortion.
The one at the Los Altos, or at Palo Alto at New Varsity.
No, we were. This is like, it was the only, God, knock on wood, it was the only car accident I've ever been in, and it was Social Distortion. Prison Bound just came out. They were playing the I-Beam. It was Solar. No, what's that? No, was there a place? What's not the I-Beam? What was it called? The other place up there.
San Francisco.
It was in San Francisco. There was the I-Beam. It was the other club up there. Not the Cattle Club. I forgot the name of the club, but it was in the city. And I remember Social Distortion played the Cactus Club the night before, and John Maurer, the bass player, he was like, that was another band that like every Social Distortion show, I was always there. And John Maurer was like, hey man, tomorrow night, you know, we're playing San Francisco. I go, I know. He goes, hey man, I'll put you on the list. I go, really? He goes, yeah. So I go, you know, can I get a +1? He's like, yeah, no problem. So I had a +1. And then I remember, of course, you know, I turned the +1 into a +3. So now I had 4 spots. And I remember the next day, I remember we bought a keg and we just drank all day at this apartment I had. And it just turned into one of those days of like, all right, now it's time to drive the Kennel Club. It's time to drive to, you know, San Francisco, and didn't even think about it. Jumped into a car, and this girl was driving, and I never even like put 2 and 2 together that like, oh wait a minute, she's been drinking all day too. And we got up to Bay Area right around the farm, right by 280. You know, I was like, we're on the 280, and I remember she went to get off at the exit to go into the city, and before we pulled over, and I remember I got outside of the car, and we had to take a leak, and I remember I grabbed my leather and I put it on to take the leak, got back in the car. Now we're jamming into the city. She gets off at our exit, but as she's going in there, it kind of dawns on me, wow man, she's going pretty fast. And I look up front, she's turned around with like a red cup from the keg and a smoke going, no hands on the steering wheel.
Fuck.
And at the last second, my buddy reached over and grabbed the steering wheel, turned it, and we hit the divider. And I'll never forget, we just like Dukes of Hazzard it, like straight up, landed on the side, and we were sliding down the 280, and there was just sparks, window, glass, everything broke. Everyone was laying on top of me, and it was one of those moments where I'm like seeing the asphalt slide by, and we slid for so long that I actually said, how long are we gonna keep fucking sliding? Like I said, like finally the car stopped, and we all jumped out of the car, and I remember the girl driving was like, I got a DUI last month, and we were like, oh my God. So one of our buddies stayed with her, and then we just ran, and I remember like running off of the freeway, and we're in this industrial area, and everyone's like, just like, you know, oh my God, did that just happen? And then we're all sitting there, and everyone's like, are you okay? Okay. One guy's arm's kind of jacked. We're like, okay, cool. And before we knew it, we're like, you know, like we've just almost been killed, but like it took all of about like 3 seconds, or, you know, like 10 minutes to go. That was fucking gnarly. That was And then everyone's like, what do we do now? And we're like, we're going to the show. And then we just like made our way back into the city, and we got there, and it was, but we had to get back that night. And that guy, Chris, gave us a ride home that night.
That's awesome. That's totally awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was kind of that kid. Like I was around all the time, but, and, you know, cause I just wanted to like be a part of that whole scene. And like, now, you know, now that we're all older and stuff, like I'm friends with everybody now that, you know, once you grow up, like when you're a little kid everybody's like 2 years is a big deal. So you're not always
Oh, totally.
you're not always in the same circle of friends, even if you are. And then once you get to be like 20, 22 and 20 is no big, it doesn't matter anymore. And so we all became friends after that. But every now and then, like I'll pop a comment in about how I remember something that older people were getting into, and they'll be like, how do you know that? And I'll be like, yeah, I was the little kid in the back. I was like Lars, you know, I was like Lars, where I was in the back, like just like laying low, like just hoping some bigger dude didn't start picking on me.
Yeah. That's funny, man. Yeah, I remember as a kid always seeing you at all the shows.
Every show I could possibly get to, yeah.
Every show, totally.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, I think we covered most of the stuff I wanted to get into, Joe. I know some of the other bands that Joe's been in. You know, it's funny because when we were getting going on this, we were shooting the shit and getting warmed up for this and stuff. And I was watching a documentary the other night. Just like something to have on while I was getting ready to go to sleep. And it was the documentary about the Cadillac Tramps. And Joe just happens to be in that. And like me and my wife are sitting on the couch, and we're getting stuff together for tomorrow's recording session of this stuff. And it's just on in the background. And all of a sudden I hear a voice. And I just pointed at the TV without looking up. And I was like, look who it is. And she looks up, and it's fucking Joe. And she's like, oh, holy shit. Like he's on the schedule for Thursday. And I was like, yeah, that's, yeah. But,
Cadillac Tramps, man.
And so, Joe's been in a bunch of bands, and one of the bands that Joe was in that we mentioned earlier, he was in a band called Wax, that actually had some distinguishing moments in their career. Like one of them was like Spike Jonze. Like one of the first music videos he ever directed was for a Wax song. It's just a dude running down the street on fire in slow motion. It's it's got Spike Jonze stank all over it. What was the song that was for?
That was the first video that Spike ever did. The first video he ever did was for Wax, and it was on our record when we were in Caroline. It was for a song called Hush, and you can actually look that up. That's the first video he's ever did. It was in Chicago. We did it, when we were on Caroline Records, and then basically Spike does that video for us, and at that point he's just Spike. He's just skateboard. He makes skateboard videos. Yeah, at that point he's my friend that can do sloppies at the Arco station on Melrose. Like I remember we would always meet up, we'd skate. He was super cool, and we just skated. And Spike lived on Mansfield, right near that Arco. And I remember he was friends with the guys in Wax, and they were like, and we had this guy named Dan Field, who was super cool and knew a lot of the people we knew from San Jose. And Dan was like, hey man, when you guys make your video, you should have Spike do it. And we're like, okay. We don't know anyone else to do videos. So Caroline gave him some money. He made a video. And then there was a weird moment where like our Caroline record came out. We went in the studio to make our next record for Virgin. We made that record. Meanwhile, Spike goes on to do like a Breeders video, a Beastie Boys. Like he just starts blowing up. He does the Weezer video. I mean, all this shit. Meanwhile, our band got dropped. So we were off the map for about a good 2 years. We get re-signed. And one of the things that, I obviously stayed friends with Spike, he said to me, hey man, like when you guys get it back, to where you get back on track and you get signed, or when this record comes out, like he basically said, when your record comes out, I'll do a video for you. And I kind of had that in my back pocket, and I totally used it, because now all of a sudden you had this director that was like Beastie Boys, the Weezer video, he was huge. So then, so then all of a sudden, like we were getting talked to again to get re-signed with this record that we had. And at that point, I said to the label, like, hey, one of the things that we got to do is that if we, whoever puts out a record, Spike's going to do the video. And that was like, what? Like, Spike? I'm like, yeah. And they were like, all right. That was like a huge thing. So then all of a sudden we were re-signed to Interscope, and it was this crazy, like, it was such just a moment, like over 10 days, that like we went from like nothing going on to like everything going on. And basically when we got re-signed, I said to Spike, can you do the video? He said, yeah, but the label had already added the song to radio. And we were like, they were like, we need a video like now. Like and I remember they're like, we need to shoot a video this weekend. So me and Spike and I were on the phone, and he was going back and forth with ideas, and he was, being very Spike. And I remember we had to shoot the video on a Saturday, and he called me like probably on a Thursday or Friday and was like, hey, I think I got an idea. I just did a video with fire hose, and I did some stuff with like slow motion with fire, and it looks really cool when you slow down fire. I go, oh, really? He goes, yeah. And he goes, all right, so yeah, we'll do something like that. And I'm kind of like, okay, And I remember the label was just like, what, like no treatment, nothing. Like, I'm like, dude, it's Spike Jonze. Don't worry, he'll make it happen. And then all of a sudden, Spike sent us like, hey, all right, this is where we're shooting it. Be there at this time. We showed up. And then his whole idea was like, this guy was going to run by us on fire. We would all be in the video. We wouldn't be playing, but it was.
Weren't you guys just like sitting on the street, like reading newspapers and drinking coffee and stuff?
Yeah. Like what he did was he was like, since it was all slow motion. I mean, it's really what he did was it's like a 30-second shot.
Did that actually happen? Did that actually happen outside of that Arco station? Was it Arco station? Okay, I wasn't sure because I was trying to think about it.
No, we did on Gardner and Sunset.
Okay, I know exactly. I remember exactly.
Yeah. So there's like Guitar Center's up the street.
Guitar Center's right there.
There's that school across the street, and then so you go down Gardner, and at that point, the guy would run down the street Gardner, and then he hangs a right onto Sunset to go to the bus station, the bus stop, and the whole premise of the video was that like he's on fire, but like none of us notice him. It's like just like society's so crazy you don't even notice a guy running on fire. Right. But what he did was he put each guy in the band like the guy runs by you in slow motion. So like I'm selling newspapers, Soda's crossing the street, Dave or Jeff, I think he's just like, oh, he's on the phone, and then Loomis throws something into the garbage. Like, and then what we also did on that video, which was super cool, was like we had all these people like Andy Jenkins, who at the time was like the art director for like a magazine, like, and he did all the art for Side One Dummy.
Yeah,
and I think
Andy Jenkins is a badass for sure.
I think Andy Jenkins has went on to do like insane stuff, and then Gons, the skater, Mark Gonzalez, he's in it. What else? There's like, it was just a mishmash of all these people, and then we made the video and turned it in. And the video, it was the first video added to MTV that like they had to like, don't try this at home.
It was the birth of Jackass, and nobody knew it. Yeah. And then Loomis didn't know he was going to get a career as a member of Jackass crew either.
Yeah, it was crazy, and then you also had like you had the Beavis and Butthead. They loved the video. It just like we went from like obscurity to like overnight, like it was just insanity. I mean, we literally, we were a band that was dropped that had nothing going on to all of a sudden a band that had a song on the radio and a video by Spike Jonze, and it was epic. It was so great.
Yeah, I remember in that dead space between when you guys got dropped and when you got signed again, and one of the things that, and it's another one of those things that about the lore of Joe Sib in my mind and our friendship over the years is I remember at that time you were like, I will make this happen again. And the entire world was like, nobody gets that shot twice, buddy. And you were like, no, I will make this happen again. And you started like booking your band at like the Hollywood Wax Museum because the band was called Wax. And you were just like, fucking made it happen. And you made it a reality. And everybody was like, fuck, man. I remember that time. That's how Side One
Dummy started. That's how Side One Dummy started, because I had a label called Side One. And then when I put out the Wax record, Bill was going to start a label called Dummy. And we just merged together. And he was like, let's do this. And then, when Wax went on the Interscope, I just was like, you know what, man, I never want to be in that place again. Let's keep Side One Dummy going. And him and I just started signing bands together. And then when Wax, fell apart, and then I started 22 Jacks. 22 Jacks was on Side One. And, it was one of those kind of things like, looking back on it, because it's kind of like, for someone that would be listening to this right now and go, well, let me get this straight. So a label dropped you and then you got re-signed. Like, what's the big deal about that? The big deal about it, or the weirdness to it, or the strangeness to it was all, there's no internet. There's no there's no like like there's independent labels, but it isn't like it is today where like you and I could start a band and then we can upload it to CD Baby and it's on every configuration and everyone, you know, like that's what I love about technology now is that, you know, you can literally, you know, I see people do it all the time. They write like 5 songs and then they like upload it and then you know, someone shares it, another person shares it, and the next day they're like, dude, you know, like if you look at the Billie Eilish thing, I mean, that whole thing is straight up, you know, you have, you know, what's his name? Finneas, he records this song. I mean, Finneas, the Billie Eilish story is so insane because Finneas was in a band. I mean, I got so many demos of Finneas's band because I know his mom and his mom's amazing.
What I don't know. I don't know very much about this Finneas person. I'm familiar with Billie Eilish as a name.
Okay,
but I'm not familiar with the music.
So this is the thing. It's like it's the thing that's so crazy is that so like for me this is there. It's like this will put in perspective of like just the difference in times. So like you know. When you wanted to get signed, like the other night I said to someone, like, I remember, you know, when I used to hear about people moving to LA to make it. And like, when I moved to LA, like I moved to LA to make it. Like straight up, that was a term. Like you didn't, like nowadays, I mean, I've met, you know, millennials. And I remember once they said to me, it's lame to say that you're moving to LA to make it. And I was like, all right, well, you know, what are you here for then? You know, it's like, and I don't want to bag on millennials because there's a lot of millennials I love. And then
like our children.
you know, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, I had a full boomer moment recently. I was on tour with this kid and he's a younger dude and I love him. And his manager and him were sitting backstage and they're like 2 kids, right? And I'm the oldest one there. And I'm opening for him, and we just hit it off, and we were joking around. And then he said to me, he goes, he said something like, "Oh, okay, boomer." And I go, "Dude, I'm not a boomer." And he goes, "What do you mean?" And I go, "Dude, boomers are born in 64 and 65." And he goes, "Well, when were you born?" I go, 67. And he goes, "Dude, that's such a boomer thing to say." And I'm like, you know, like it's 2 years apart, and he's you're holding to it.
Dude, let's get something straight right now. Boomer is anyone older than me, and millennials anyone younger than me. And that is the standard for every single person on earth.
Yeah.
And it's like it's no longer yeah, we're totally Gen X, but in the parlance of our times, that is how those 2 words are used. Anyone older is a boomer, and anyone younger is a millennial, and that is
now I've just
and so is the law.
yeah. Now I've just embraced it. But anyway, but the thing is that you know getting signed, like you said, it was just you know at that point you know you there were so many gatekeepers and that's the thing that sucked. You know there's so many gatekeepers and there was these labels and the labels were that reached out to the gatekeepers and there was the radio and there was only like 7 songs played on the radio and there was no Spotify. And
there was an A&R guy. There was an A&R guy you had to deal with.
There was just imagine there was just all these people. It was like a video game and you had to make it through all these levels. So to get signed meant that you went through these levels. It's no different than Call of Duty and you're like, oh my God, dude, you got that far in the game. Anyone that plays Call of Duty is like, dude, that's rad. and the Billie Eilish story, which is so killer, is you know you have this kid Finneas. I mean, talk about punk rock. Like he was in this band and they were cool. They weren't.
What band was it?
You know, it was just I forgot the name of it, but it was very like I remember his mom. She's super cool. She's a homeschool mom, and she was really involved with the homeschool network that our kids were in for a little while. And I met her, and I met Finneas, and he was just such a just like a wide-eyed, super cool kid. And he had his band, and you know, I remember I would listen to it, and you know, no diss. It just seemed very like Disney. You know, it was very like everyone in the band, like it was just too nice. Yeah, it just didn't have like when I looked at his band and I listened to it with like side one dummy ears, it didn't have what we were looking for. It just didn't fit with like our vibe. And it just felt very like, I don't know, it just felt too nice. it just wasn't for us. And he knew that. And we stayed, obviously we stayed friends. His mom was super cool, but I remember they got some dates on the Warp Tour, and I'll never forget this. I met the Warp Tour, and like I got Flogging Molly on it, or I got Go-Go Bordello, and it's just like they're on the main stage, and like we've had this amazing day at the Warp Tour, and I'm like, all right, it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I'm out of here, I'm done for the day. And I remember I'm walking through this field, dude, I'll never forget it, and here comes Finneas. And he's got his guitar, and I think he has like 2 guitars, and whatever he's carrying is pretty heavy, and it's hot, dude. It's the end of the day. People are tired. The sun's setting, and I'm leaving this destination, and he's showing up, and he looks at me, and I go, hey, what's up, Finneas? He goes, yeah, we're playing at like 7:30, and I remember in my head going, 7:30, that's when Pennywise is on. Like, who's going to be seeing him play? And I remember I go, oh man. And before I could say, I was like, oh, I'm taking off. And he goes, yeah. He was like cool about it. He's like, yeah, dude, I get it. Like, you don't want to stay. And then I remember, he goes, and in my head, I was like, I remember being that kid where you're like, I don't care, dude. I got my guitars. I'm walking through the mud. I'm walking through the dust. We're going to rock at 7:30. I don't care. And then, years later, obviously, Billy and him hook up, and the way that they hooked up, it was so crazy. He writes this song, he's in his room, and then he says to his sister, hey, can you sing over this? And she does, and he goes, that sounds fucking awesome.
Is Billy Eilish his sister?
Billy Eilish,
okay.
Billy Eilish is his sister, Billy.
Oh, okay.
And she was just like, they lived in this house, like no different than any other family. And he said, hey, can you come in and sing on this? She sang on it, and I remember
shout out Highland Park.
The song. Yeah, they uploaded the song, and it was that joke. Like, they uploaded it, like, oh cool, here's our song, and then the thing that happened was NPR was like, dude, this song rips, and then they kind of blasted it out there, and then that was where it all started. It just grew from there. And I remember, it was so crazy when they won their awards this year. I was sitting there, and all, as much as, and I remember like during the ride, I headlined the Improv one night, and it was just like 2 years ago. And Billy and Finneas and their mom and dad, they're like, hey, we're all going to come see you do stand-up. And dude, I remember I knew it was on because the whole time I'm on stage, you just heard everyone going, dude, that's Billy. Like, they could just, like, the energy of the room kept shifting over to the corner where she was. And I'm like, dude, it's go time. And then, they blew up. And then when they won all those awards, all that went through my head was like, that is such a testament to Finneas and his sister and the mom and the dad of just never giving up. They never gave up. They never were the victim. They never, dude, they heard the word no so many times that just
even from you.
Yeah, I said no. I remember they gave me this. I was like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. I remember I sent it around to some other people that were, because the one thing that, like, if I can't do something with the band, the only thing I will say with Billy, when they sent me the material that ended up becoming the material, I knew at that point, I was like, you know what, man, this is past where you start with me. This
right.
is the next. And I was right. That's the one thing I'll give myself credit. I was like, you know what? Like, this isn't like we do 7 inches and we go out on the Warped Tour. This is next level shit. And I remember though, when I saw them get those awards, I was so stoked because I was like, you know what, man? Like, that is a testament of, you can, like, today, man. I mean, like, you see in this bedroom, my son has these beats, he has the computer. It's like, I mean, he could be sitting here and there could be a beat cruising around in here that all of a sudden, you got a kid that makes a record out of his room.
Yeah, no, Nate's really talented. I remember when he was posting videos of himself singing and playing piano, and I was like, God damn, that kid's got some skills.
But I love where music's at now, where those gatekeepers of like, hey, I'm stoked that I had that moment in time, get signed, get re-sign, all that. But I love where it's at right now, where you can post videos. It's even like what you said when we started. You're like, dude, your Instagram, I felt like you were at 4,000. Now you're at like 16, 17,000 people. I mean, dude, that's all just from like putting clips out, other people sharing my material. Like, none of that was possible You know, I mean, the one thing I always say is like, imagine if you and I would have been able to have access to all of these things when we were in bands in San Jose. You know, imagine if Adam Baum would have had access to all this for the Faction. You know, there'd
no
be
doubt.
so many more.
No doubt.
You know?
Yeah, I'm about to
So,
with this show. I'm about to like enter into that same race where I'm going to be like, yep, my life is going to become like trying to navigate those same alleyways as you are doing with your stand up and with, you know, musicians are now and stuff. And, you know, I'm just getting geared up for it. It's, you know, I'm excited. I think people are enjoying the show and liking what they're hearing so far. And I, you know, I'm putting a lot of effort into making it as good as I can. And I appreciate people like you coming on and, you know, spending time with me on something that isn't anything yet. And when people hear this eventually, you know, maybe, because that's one of the other things. These things go out onto the internet and they stay there. You know, they stay there forever. And someone may listen to this 4 years from now and be like, what do you mean you didn't have any followers then? You know, because, you know, it's like blown up into some huge thing or what, you know, who knows where it'll go. But,
dude, you look at those first Rogan podcasts. It's him. You know, it's him on a couch with two dudes, and it's so raw. You know, and now look where Rogan's at. I mean, and that guy, you know, 10, 12 years later, built it up, man.
Well, he was very lucky to be famous to begin with. I was never on Fear Factor for like.
I loved him on Fear Factor.
Dude, I love that show. My kids to this day are like, oh man, yeah. When we were growing up, you didn't talk to dad when Fear Factor was on.
He was so good on. You know what I loved about him on Fear Factor, and obviously we see it now on his podcast. It never felt like Rogan was hosting Fear Factor. He felt like he was almost as bummed as the person was that had to like swim through the scorpions to get the whale egg, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is so lame." Like he even was like, "This is lame," and it was weird. He had such a great. I remember. You know, I didn't know who he was, and I remember watching and always going, "I like that guy. He has a good vibe."
Yeah, I was familiar with him from his stand up. I used to be like super like into stand up comedy back when Comedy Central was just a place where you could just watch stand up comedy and stuff. I watched a lot of that stuff, and I knew who everybody was for a long time. And I remember when he showed up on news radio, and I was like, "Oh, Joe Rogan." And then, you know, after that, I've been a Joe Rogan fan forever. And I do like his podcast, and, you know, it's good stuff. I don't always like it, and I don't always agree with him or who he has on, but that's the great thing about that show is that he takes those chances. He's like, I don't care if other people don't like this person, or he will not care if he agrees with the person. He's not going to suck anybody's ass on that show. He's going to be like, if he disagrees with somebody's position, he will tell them why he thinks they're wrong. And, you know, there's not nearly enough shows in the world like that. If Joe Rogan's brought us anything, it's, you know, it's that an extension of the Howard Stern thing where it's like you say anything and the guest isn't special. They're just another person that you're talking to. And I think that's one of the goals I have for this is that when people listen to it, it just sounds like me and you sitting around shooting the shit, because if anybody could be a third person on me and Joe's phone calls when he calls me to do a flyer, this is just what they sound like. He'll tell me some funny story about, you know, hanging out with the Ramones or the Eddie Vedder story. Like those are things that we've talked about in these phone calls when we're supposed to be doing work, and we end up just sitting around shooting the shit. And so
I feel like we talk more about it. I feel like because you have older kids, I talk to you more about my kids now. Like I'll always call you up and be like,
that.
"Hey Mike, can you do a flyer?" And then I'll go, "Hey man, has any of your kids ever had the police called on them?"
Dude, totally. We
totally.
like legitimately had that conversation, and I was like, "Oh yeah, dude, totally." Like this, and I'll tell him like what happened, and he'll be like, "Well, yeah, okay. Well, at least I didn't have that going on."
Yeah.
Or
hey,
vice
dude,
versa.
You know what I realized right now? Oh my God, my computer's gonna die. You know what I realized is that you and the Joe Rogan podcast have one thing in common right now. You ready?
What's that?
Dude, marathon podcast right now with Joe Sib. We're going on like 2 hours.
Dude, I got like an hour and a half on the. I wanted to shout out your hat real quick before we jump off. His hat's from Keith Meeksterbrow. He's a graphic designer, and he was a professional skateboarder that me and Joe grew up with. And I couldn't not have a Keith Meek shout out because that dude's rad.
And you got to go to his website, meeksterbrow.com. You can follow him on Instagram. You can get this hat or anything with this logo on it. It's supporting NorCal skateboarding style. Keith Meeks, legend. And I'd be really stoked. And if you buy something off his website, say Joe Sib sent you, and then that way he'll give me more free shit. So that'd be cool. But
All
dude,
right.
I'm stoked we did this.
Yeah, for sure. I want you to come back for sure. I know we're going to do a movie review at some point. And so I know your computer's dying, so I'm going to let you go.
Do we do the movie review today? Because I can do it if I can get the charger back from Nate.
Yeah, we'll totally jump.
You want to do it?
Yeah, we'll totally jump off and do that. But let's finish up here real quick. Let's wrap this up real quick.
Sorry.
Thank you, Joe, for coming on. I appreciate it. It is a good time. I think people will enjoy listening to us. And yeah, you guys keep an ear out for the movie review. We're gonna do Cool Hand Luke. So thanks again, Joe.
Thank you, man. It was great seeing you, Mike.
Yep.
Later.